She thought she was alone, until the blouse slipped from her hands and she turned to find her stepson standing silently behind her, eyes locked, not moving an inch. What happened next wasn't just awkward, it unraveled secrets no one was ready to face. A quiet house, a distant marriage, and one moment that changed everything. Was it just an accident, or something more? When unspoken feelings rise and boundaries blur, nothing stays hidden for long. Stay tuned, because what began with a simple mistake is about to expose desires, betrayals, and a twist no one saw coming. It had been one of those long, quiet afternoons where the air felt still, and every small sound seems louder than usual. The house was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and I had just finished folding the last bit of laundry when it happened. I wasn't expecting anyone to be home, not this early, so I didn't think twice when I walked into the hallway carrying a small stack of clothes in my arms. That's when it slipped. My blouse. It slid right off the top of the pile and floated to the floor like a feather. I bent down to pick it up, thinking nothing of it, until I saw him. He was standing there. Just a few steps away. My stepson. I hadn't even heard the front door open, hadn't realized he'd come home early from class. We both froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Time seemed to pause between us, the way it sometimes does when something unexpected breaks into the ordinary rhythm of life. I felt my face warm instantly, a wave of embarrassment washing over me. It wasn't what it looked like, at least not to me, but the timing couldn't have been worse. He didn't move. Not even a step. Just stood there, eyes wide, lips parted like he was about to say something, but never did. I quickly scooped up the blouse, holding it close to my chest as if that might somehow undo the awkwardness. I opened my mouth to explain, to laugh it off, anything to shake the tension, but nothing came out. And he still didn't move. There was something in his eyes. Not judgment exactly, and not confusion either. Just a look that made my heart race faster than it should have. I wasn't sure what to make of it, and honestly, I didn't know what to feel myself. I'd always seen him as family, of course, but standing there in that moment, something between us had shifted. I forced a smile, hoping that would break the silence. "Didn't hear you come in," I said lightly, trying to make it feel like no big deal. But he still didn't answer. That silence said more than words ever could. And then, he finally took a step forward. He took a slow, cautious step forward, still not saying anything, and my breath caught just a little. I wasn't sure if it was the tension or just the weight of the moment pressing down between us. I tried to stay calm, acting like everything was fine, like it was all just an innocent mistake. And maybe it was. But it didn't feel that simple anymore. I turned and started walking toward the laundry room, hoping he'd just go to his room, pretend it never happened. But I could hear his footsteps behind me, soft and steady. He followed. My mind started spinning, pulling up memories I hadn't thought about in years. He wasn't a kid anymore, he'd grown up so fast. Somewhere along the way, the dynamic had shifted. I didn't even notice it happening. His father and I had been married for almost 5 years. Things between us had grown distant lately, more like roommates than anything else. We barely spoke unless it was about groceries or bills. I hadn't wanted to admit how lonely I'd been feeling, how quiet the house had become even with other people in it. My stepson had always been respectful, kind, helpful when I needed an extra hand. But lately, there'd been tension in the air between us. Small things. Long looks. Quick glances that lasted just a little too long. Now, with him standing behind me, still silent, I couldn't tell if he was waiting for me to say something or if he was just as unsure as I was. The air felt heavier than before, like something unspoken was hanging between us. I stood still for a second, blouse still clutched in my hand, heart thudding hard in my chest. Then I heard him take another step closer. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My back felt stiff, my hands clutched the blouse tighter than before. I was trying to think of something, anything, to say that would ease the awkwardness, but my thoughts were tangled. Behind me, his steps paused. I could feel him there, close enough to change the air around me. Still, not a word. That silence had a weight to it, like he was waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Maybe it wasn't just about what had happened in the hallway. Maybe it had been building, quietly, over time. The late-night talks in the kitchen when neither of us could sleep. The times he offered to help with dinner, even when I didn't ask. Those moments had felt comforting back then, like little breaks in the loneliness. I didn't see anything wrong with them at the time. But now, at this moment, I started wondering if I'd missed something, or ignored it. And then there was his dad. We hadn't connected in months. He traveled more, worked late, and when he was home, he buried himself in his phone. We stopped sharing things, meals, thoughts, even eye contact. I wasn't proud of how things had changed, but I'd accepted it quietly. Maybe too quietly. A soft voice behind me finally broke the silence. "Are you okay?" he asked, and something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. He wasn't talking about the blouse anymore. It felt deeper than that, like he'd seen through more than I realized. I nodded without turning around. "Yeah, just surprised, that's all." Another pause. Longer this time. I could feel the weight of his eyes on me again. Then he said, even softer, "You don't seem okay lately." His words sank into me deeper than I expected. I still didn't turn around, but my grip on the blouse loosened. Maybe because I was tired of pretending. Maybe because I hadn't heard someone ask how I was in a long time, not like that. There was no judgment in his voice. Just concern. And something else I couldn't quite place. "I'm fine," I said again, but it didn't sound convincing, not even to me. He stayed quiet, but the silence didn't feel empty this time. It felt full, like he was waiting, like he knew there was more I wasn't saying. I could feel my throat tightening, emotions pressing against the surface. I hated how vulnerable I suddenly felt. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. I was the adult. The one holding everything together. But lately, even that felt like an act I was barely pulling off. I finally turned around, slow and hesitant. He was standing just a few feet away, his expression soft but serious. There was something different in his eyes now, something I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I just hadn't let myself see it. That quiet strength, that steady calm. It made the space between us feel even more fragile. "You don't talk to him anymore," he said, voice low. "Dad. You barely look at each other." I blinked, caught off guard. "That's not your concern," I replied quickly, almost too quickly. He nodded, like he expected me to say that. But then he stepped closer, just one step, and said, "Maybe not." But I noticed things. My heart was pounding now. Too fast. Too loud. The air in the room felt thick, like everything was about to shift. And for the first time, I didn't know if I was ready for what would come next. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could speak, we both heard it. The front door. The sound of keys jangling, the creak of the hinges, and then the unmistakable thud of it closing. My heart dropped. My husband was home. Earlier than usual. And for a split second, neither of us moved. The hallway suddenly felt colder. I stepped back instinctively, brushing past the laundry basket and setting the blouse down as casually as I could, like none of it had happened. Like I hadn't just been standing there, caught in a moment that shouldn't have existed. He did the same, backing off, shifting his posture, face returning to something more neutral. But it was too late. Something had already changed. Something we couldn't take back. "Hey," my husband's voice called out, distant but getting closer. "Where is everyone?" I looked at my stepson, and for the first time, he looked uncertain, maybe even nervous. The tension from earlier hadn't gone away. If anything, it had thickened with the sound of that door. I took a breath, forcing calm into my voice. "We're in the laundry room," I called back. Then, just as I turned toward the hallway, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down and froze. A message from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. My sister. He told me everything. "We need to talk. Alone." A chill ran down my spine. I stared at the screen, confused, caught between two storms, what was happening right in front of me, and whatever was waiting behind that message. I didn't know what he could have possibly told her, or why now, but one thing was clear, this wasn't just about a dropped blouse anymore. Something deeper was unraveling. And fast. I barely had time to process the message before my husband stepped into the room. He looked between the two of us, eyebrows raised, sensing the tension immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting his bag down slowly, like he already knew the answer. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just laundry," I said, too quickly. My stepson cleared his throat and nodded, stepping away toward the hallway, but not before our eyes met for one last second. Something silent passed between us, something unfinished. But it would have to wait. I turned my attention back to the phone, heart still racing. I excused myself and stepped into the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I called my sister, unsure of what I was about to hear. She picked up immediately. "He called me," she said without saying who. She didn't have to. "He said you've been distant. Sad. Not yourself." I sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would he call you? After all this time?" There was a pause. "Because he thought you needed someone to talk to. He said he was worried. That he saw things no one else was seeing." My chest tightened. He hadn't been quiet out of confusion. He'd been watching. Protecting. Even when I didn't ask him to. "I think he cares about you," she added. "More than he knows how to say." I didn't respond. My mind was spinning. Everything that had felt confusing, his closeness, his silence, even that moment in the hallway, wasn't about crossing a line. It was about trying to reach me before I disappeared completely into myself. Just as I was beginning to breathe easier, there was a knock on the bedroom door. My husband's voice came through, low and serious. "I just found your phone's backup from last year. Why is there a message from my son, to you, that you never told me about?" My stomach dropped. The twist I hadn't seen coming wasn't in the present, it had already happened. And now, everything I thought I understood was about to fall apart. I stared at the door, frozen. My husband's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge behind it. The kind that doesn't come from guessing, only from knowing. I stood up slowly, phone still in hand, and opened the door. He was standing there, holding his own phone, face tight with something between confusion and betrayal. "I don't understand," he said, showing me the message. It was from months ago. A short, concerned note from his son, "She's not doing okay. I don't know what to do anymore. I remembered it then, barely. A time when I'd broken down quietly in the kitchen, thinking no one had noticed. But he had. And he'd reached out, not to cause trouble, but because he cared. It wasn't anything inappropriate, I said, keeping my voice steady. He just saw what you didn't. That I was slipping. My husband looked at me for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think you'd hear me, I thought. But instead, I said, because I wasn't sure how. And by the time I wanted to, too much had changed. He sighed and leaned against the doorframe, eyes tired. So much distance. I didn't even realize. I know, I whispered. Me neither. Later that night, the house was quiet again. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing, thinking about how close I'd come to losing myself in silence. My stepson had left without saying much, just a soft goodnight and a look I couldn't quite read. But I understood it now. It wasn't confusion or tension. It was a concern. He had seen the cracks when no one else did. The message from my sister, the questions from my husband, the moment in the hallway, it all led to the same truth. I hadn't been okay. But maybe now, I could start being honest about it. With myself. With all of them. Before bed, I sent a message to my stepson, thank you. For seeing me. He replied only a few minutes later, always. And just like that, a part of the silence lifted. Not everything was fixed, but something real had finally broken through.